is yours.
Thank you, Ira. Thanks for the introduction and the background on the Sustainability Curriculum Consortium as well. And thanks to all of you for joining us today for the webinar, Connecting Transformative Learning and Behavior Change. I'm Deb McNamara, and as Ira said, I'm with the Northwest Earth Institute, and I'm really excited to be speaking with you all today. So I'll start by going over our webinar objectives. So in the next hour or so, I'll be identifying some key transformative learning and behavior change concepts, and in particular, we'll talk about why these ideas are important in the context of sustainability education. You'll also learn a little bit about the Northwest Earth Institute course books and online EcoChallenge tools that you can use in your classroom or on campus. And elsewhere if any of you are joining not from the higher education sector. But we've developed our programs with transformative learning and behavior change in mind, so I'll tell you a little bit about those. And then I'll end by highlighting some implementation ideas and practices that campuses have used to date. So I'd love to start with this quote by Lacy Cagle, who is the Director of Learning with the Northwest Earth Institute. And Lacy was actually meant to be on today's webinar, but could not join us because of a family situation. But she is definitely available as a resource for those of you who might like to know more. She's the one that develops our curriculum and has done a lot of the research on transformative and behavior change, transformative learning and behavior change for us. So I'll read this quote. I think it kind of frames what we'll be talking about today. So education has historically functioned to reproduce society and societal systems, but sustainability education aims to follow a new path, to recreate society and shape human systems that are just, equitable, and regenerative. Instead of continuing to educate for the current environmentally and socially degrading global marketplace, education can transform and renew society by helping citizens discover new ways of thinking and being. So I like to start with that because I think it really points to what we're doing as sustainability educators and why it is different from other kinds of education that we might partake in. I'll just quickly share a bit about the Northwest Earth Institute. So we are a nonprofit organization. We'll be celebrating our 25th anniversary next year, and during that time we've engaged about 185,000 people and just over 400 higher education institutions. And our primary offerings are a series of sustainability focused course books that are discussion based, and I'll say a bit more towards the end of our webinar about these. But these are two of our titles highlighted on the screen right now, Powering a Bright Future and Change Our Choice. So we have a variety of course books that we offer. And then we also offer an online EcoChallenge platform, which is entirely action-focused and kind of gets to the behavior change side of things. The way we look at it as the course books are really serving the transformative learning process, and then the EcoChallenge is serving the behavior change aspect, although certainly there's a lot of overlap there as well. So I'll begin by going over some transformative learning concepts, and before I dive in, I just want to mention that certainly today's webinar is meant to just give you all some key concepts that we have held in mind as we develop our programs, but certainly you could also integrate these concepts into your classrooms and efforts. And I thought I'd start by just showing a little bit about our pedagogical process, and we like to talk about it in terms of connecting, reflecting, and acting. So in everything that we're doing and we're facilitating people to do, we're thinking about these three processes at work. So we want to make sure that that there's collaborative learning happening. The peer-to-peer piece is really important, so there's connection happening, and then that there's also personal reflection happening, as well as the opportunities for acting. And I'll dive a little bit more into all of these things, but I just wanted to show you this image and just kind of put these three words out there. They're easy to remember and really a great way to make sure that you're getting at both the transformative side of things as well as the action-focused and behavior change side of things. So a few key concepts, transformative learning concepts that we keep in mind and take to heart, and I think are really important in sustainability education, are approaching learning as change versus learning for acquisition. And also learning as a creative and participatory process. With transformative learning, we're trying to recreate the underlying thoughts and assumptions, the system, structures, and society. So as that quote that I read earlier points to, unlike other kinds of education, we're really trying to get people to reflect on things at the level of the values and the attitudes and kind of morals, and also habits too, and I'll say a bit more about that. Transformative learning is also trying to make the invisible visible, particularly our assumptions that are kind of informing our experience of what is real. And then finally, fostering critical reflection is a really important component of transformative learning. Ultimately, some of the goals of transformative learning are to empower individuals to change their perspective, which that's a big that is sort of the question here, is especially when it comes to changing behaviors. And I'll say a bit more about this when we talk about behavior change, but kind of addressing the say-do gap, like why, particularly with environmental values, why so many people say one thing but have a hard time acting in alignment with what we say. So perspective is certainly a first step in that process of crossing that say-do gap. So we're wanting to empower people to change their perspective, and we're doing that through creating supportive environments. And often that supportive environment has to have a social connection. And we're creating a space for critical reflection to occur, and then attending to assumptions and beliefs. And I wanted to share with you one of the primary tools that we use in implementing transformative learning through our programs. And it's called the iceberg model, and maybe some of you are familiar with this. But we use this model in several of our discussion focused course books. Basically, and again, I guess before I go into the model, I'll just say that transformative learning often is really integrating systems thinking into the learning process. And I think this iceberg model is a really helpful model for integrating the systems thinking, and then also attending to all of these different layers that are going on. So the idea behind the iceberg model is that only 10% of an iceberg is above the surface of the water, and 90% is below. And the idea is that the ocean currents are acting on the unseen below the water. And so we too, if we want to have a deeper learning process, we also need to be attending to all of these unseen things happening below the surface. So that's the idea behind the model and why it's called that. With systems thinking in general, and with this model, we're looking for patterns and relationships with any issues. And I'll give you an example in just a moment. But so we're not just looking at the events, but we're also looking at the patterns and trends, the underlying structures, and then the very deepest level is this mental models level, and that's where the transformation or the transformative learning has its most potential, is that level. And that is really the level of the attitudes and the beliefs and the morals and the values. So the idea is that for any truly transformative learning to happen, you have to be attending to the mental models. So I wanted to give you, this is a simple example, but just an example of how you might apply this model. And I actually work with a lot of faculty who just use the model. They in conjunction with whatever topic is being taught. So basically, this is the example of catching a cold. So looking at the event level, you would just look at what happened, and but then you kind of take it a little bit deeper, and then you start asking questions about, like, well, what are the trends, and having just having some reflection about that, and then going deeper, looking at the underlying structures and patterns. So some of the questions you might ask when you get to that underlying structures level, would be, what has influenced the patterns? What are the relationships between the parts, and so on. So in the example of the cold, this superficial example, but you might get to the realization that, I've been stressed or not eating as well. Maybe there's not healthy food near home or work. And then when you get a little bit deeper into the mental models level, you would be asking questions about the assumptions, the beliefs, and values that people hold about the system, and what beliefs keep the system in place. And I can say from having used this model myself with groups that I find it to be really very useful and very effective at generating a very deep discussion about any any issue. At one of my workshops, we talked about healthcare and kind of dialed in all these to all these questions with healthcare and the problems of healthcare. So you can really use it with anything. And before I move on, I just want to mention that you can find this online. If you did a simple Google search for Iceberg Model Northwest Earth Institute, you would find the background, the examples, and some ideas of how to use this tool. So I wanted to share that with you. So I'll move into speaking just a little bit about some behavior change concepts as well, and then I'll talk about how some of these ideas tie together and why they're important in the context of sustainability education. So with behavior change, we're thinking about how to address the say-do gap. So and just the reality is that changing habits are difficult even when we believe we should. So with environmental issues, why do so many people say, oh, it's right to recycle, or I shouldn't drive my car as much, or whatever it is, from a small scale to a large scale, or oh, we shouldn't be using as much fossil fuel. So how do we move from believing one thing and then actually following through and acting on these things. And a continuum that we keep in mind is this continuum of awareness, awareness building, generating new knowledge into the realm of transformation, and then action. So I wanted to share that with you. We definitely keep this in mind in our work, and certainly. It needs to start with the awareness building and some acquisition of new knowledge, but then the transformation is really important in making the information relevant and personal for each individual learner. And then, of course, the opportunities for action are really important. And let's see, I think I already mentioned this, but the research that we've done on transformative learning has really been focused on our curriculum development until about 8 or 9 years ago, and we started working more closely with the higher education community at about the same time. And then we decided that we wanted to make the connections to action more explicit. So in our course books, we definitely try to do that, but we also started experimenting with developing the EcoChallenge, which I'll say more about, which is our online action tool. And we just started working with ways to make these connections more explicit. So, when someone is learning about sustainability and all the issues there, and then there are also opportunities to immediately take action to address the issues that they're learning about. So I just wanted to mention that, that's how we're connecting them. So when we started looking into behavior change, one of the first things we realized was just how important the routine is in terms of making behavior change. And as the slide says here, our brains are wired for efficiency, and habits help us meet that objective. So our habits require very minimal awareness, and that's actually a great survival adaptation. But the best way to change a habit is to change the routine in this cycle of a cue and a trigger, and the routine and the reward. And so I'll just give kind of a simple example of of how this works. So if the cue or the trigger is, oh, I'm hungry, or I think I need to eat, the routine might be to get your can of soda or your packaged snack chips or whatever it is, and then the reward is you might feel better. From a sustainability perspective, you might want to change the habit because your snack that you're choosing is not it's generating more trash. Maybe you want to change the habit because you want to save money. Whatever it is, it's important to go beyond the willpower to try to change the routine or the habit, but instead create new habits. So that was kind of a light bulb for us, that creating new habits, really, it's essential to create a new routine in the cycle. So instead, an example would be, if you started to feel like, oh, I really want those, non-biodegradable snack chips, whatever it is, then you could create a new routine by going for a walk, or getting up from your desk if you're at your desk and calling a friend. So, one of the things we found was that attending to the routine, changing the routine, along with changing the context and the environment, was really important. And so we started thinking about that. How can we encourage these things in the context of sustainability habits? Here are a couple other key points that I wanted to share. So again, we found that creating new habits is easier when you disrupt the routine and you practice a new routine. Again, as I already mentioned, you're altering your environment or your context, and you're relying less on willpower to make the change. So that's something that we really found interesting, that that it's not just about willpower, but you actually need a bit more than that. And then you're looking for keystone habits that lead to other habits changing. So a keystone habit is kind of like a key habit that if you change that one, then many other things begin to change. And so we found that in the continuum of living more sustainably, so to speak, that often if you were changing one thing, there was a cascade effect where it would lead to behavior change in other areas too. And then let's see, this last bullet, I'll just say a bit about this. Local, tangible, and actionable aspects at the individual level are most successful. So again, providing time to practice and developing simulations that relate to the real world are very important. Also, again, this real-world learning, critical problem solving, and experiential active learning. So again, you can start to see, there are lots of connections between, the transformative learning tenets and then some key behavior change concepts. And so we really wanted to find a way to bring these together. And the real-world learning, and certainly educations are, often, serving to make that happen, and of course, critical problem solving and the active learning, but we wanted to figure out how to do this more tangibly with sustainability education. So this is from Redmond. I'm forgetting Redmond's first name, but I wanted to share this again with you. You can integrate these into anything that you're teaching on, or but so integrating systems thinking is really important for behavior change, and then understanding the interconnectedness. And again, you see the overlap with transformative learning. And then integrating that long-term foresighted reasoning and strategizing. And then again, as I mentioned with transformative learning, the group collaboration is really key, so the social aspect. And then, of course, the action orientation and change agent skills. So why, I guess, I want to kind of shift and just, I know I just shared a lot of different ideas about transformative learning and behavior change, but why is this important now, and why is this important in the context of sustainability, education, and engagement? And I love what Jean McGregor said a few years ago. Actually, we collaborated with Jean to offer a plenary at the ASHE conference a couple of years ago, and these were some of the key things that we said are needed now in terms of sustainability education, and having effective sustainability education that is indeed leading to the larger systemic changes that we want to see. So we need an understanding of complex systems. We need to create collaborative conversations. We need to share diverse perspectives, and we need to conduct experiments and provide opportunities for action. And we need deep work on problems, which often entails new ways of thinking. And so I wanted to share these because I feel that the transformative learning and behavior change can help us to meet these needs. And again, these are some things that I think are needed right now, and how and transformative learning and behavior change theory can help us get there. So we need the skills also with the motivation, and we need, beyond knowledge acquisition, education that encourages behaviors that line up with the knowledge. And then engagement of the whole person at the level of habits, values, and beliefs. And then the final bullet here is to transform students into leaders who are critical thinkers and active doers. So this is what we think is needed now, and as we're developing our programs, we have this in mind as our goal. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to work with University of Minnesota Morris, and I led a sustainability leadership retreat for them in 2015, and they pointed me to some research that the university had done a few years ago, and I wanted to share this as well because I think it's really key. They found that a lack of support is a barrier to changing behavior, and again, I think that's just important for us as educators to note, and particularly around all of the bad news that is involved in sustainability or environmental education. So the lack of support is a barrier. So I think that's why the group process, the peer-to-peer learning, and the social piece is really critical in terms of getting us to where we want to be. And of course, the education is needed per how-to, so not just educating on the issues, but then simultaneously educating around the solutions to the issues, and not only the larger scale solutions, but then also, how the individual student can plug in. The health and safety are good motivators. We thought that was really interesting, and actually, as a side note, we found that with our course books that we've published, the course books on the connections between food and sustainability are often the most popular. I think they're really, directly personally relevant, and get to that personal health interest that a lot of people have as a motivator. And then again, finally, what ultimately motivates is knowing how to make the changes along with the support. So I'll shift into saying a little bit about the resources that we offer from the Northwest Earth Institute, and just mention that all of our programs, our discussion course books, and the EcoChallenge are built on these key components that lead to behavior change. And this, these are all laid out. I don't think I mentioned this yet, but Lacy, who is meant to be here, has published 2 white papers, one on the connections between transformative learning and systems thinking, and then the second one on behavior change. And in her behavior change white paper, she goes into all of the research behind why these 4 things are so important. So if any of you would like to see either or both of those papers, just let me know. I'll be sharing my contact info at the end here. But we found that these 4 pieces are really important in meeting our objectives. So the offerings and learning should be inspiring, rewarding, and fun. There should be the social component. There should be the reflection and the transformation component. And then it should be sequential, so one step at a time. And I think the sequential piece is really important, particularly around larger environmental issues. And I know just in my own experiences, having been a student of environmental policy, that it did often seem so overwhelming, and it was easy to get bogged down. So having the one step at a time approach, I think, is really helpful. I know I didn't necessarily get that in my education, and I'm hoping that it's more apparent for students these days. So I'll start by just mentioning, first, I hope that the few thoughts that I've shared have been helpful so far, and that you can use these these ideas or concepts in your current class, or integrate into your syllabus. For those of you who are just starting to think about how can I get more of the transformative learning, the behavior change into my classes, I think that our discussion course books are a great resource, and I'm just highlighting 3 of our titles here, but we have 10 different books, and on a variety of sustainability topics. Two, as I mentioned, two on food. There's a general choices for sustainable living course book. Our newest one is called A Different Way, Living Simply in a Complex World. We have an energy-focused course book and a climate-focused course book, and a course book on the intersections between health and the environment. So we cover a lot of different topics, but the way that they're developed is different than your traditional course book in that they're meant to be used in the context of dialogue and generating dialogue. So each course book comes with a series of articles and book excerpts from leaders in the sustainability field, and each book is broken up into sessions, and each session has accompanying discussion questions for reflection. And I've seen them used in a variety of ways on campus. Sometimes faculty will have student groups break up in class and have small group discussion, or sometimes they'll be tasked with the homework of following the discussion format outside of class and then coming back to class and reporting on what their group uncovered during their dialogue. I've also seen faculty assign the discussion questions as personal essay writing homework, and I think it can work in in any of those ways. But I think one thing I wanted to mention is that all the readings that we choose are meant to be very thought-provoking, and they're meant to be personally relevant. So it's not just educating about the different issues. It's also asking the content, and the questions are asking really hard questions about how the content relates to the readers and the participants' personal life and personal habits and lifestyle choices and so on. In the course books, there are also action planning tools, and the real-world action assignments accompany each session's worth of content. I think I've actually already mentioned everything that's here, but I do want to say that on our website we have some training videos. So for people listening who might want to try these out in their classroom, we have some tips on how to facilitate these discussions both in and out of class. And I know we'll have some time at the end in a few minutes to go over questions, so I can certainly say more in a few moments for those of you who would like to know more about the books and how they are used. So I'll say a few words about the online EcoChallenge, which is our other primary offering. And so the EcoChallenge is entirely online. It's an action tool and also a social networking platform. And we actually offer the EcoChallenge in several different ways. So every October we offer a free public EcoChallenge. So just note that at any October we will always offer it free over a two-week period. And then we have a campus EcoChallenge, which we offer semester by semester. And the campus EcoChallenge is more focused on campus actions that pertain to campus life or residence life and so on. But basically, the idea behind the EcoChallenge, it's meant to complement the the learning in our course books, or the learning, and it could be any content that you are using. It's meant to complement it by offering the real-world action opportunities. And so basically, the participant or student will join online, create or join a team, and pick actions to try and practice over the period of 2 weeks if you did our October challenge, or in the Campus Eco Challenge you pick your own length of time. So we have some faculty who will use it for the duration of the semester to complement different units. We have some that will just do it for 2 or 3 weeks. So it's really, in the Campus Eco Challenge, it's up to you. But the goal is to try something new and develop new habits. So again, we're thinking about that, the routine, and how to help motivate people, inspire people to try out a new routine. So there are lots of actions that have to do with, try carpooling with your coworkers or your, fellow classmates if you're even driving, or, only use human-powered transportation for 2 weeks. So So we're just encouraging people to, to try something new and kind of interrupt the routine with new ones. And then, the reward is that, there's the social component. We make it a lot of fun. It's kind of a gamified online action tool, so you get points every time you meet your action, and a lot of people like to compete against one another. So we have some friendly competitions that are really fun. And then at the end, at the end of the challenge, there's a recognition of impact, both for the individual as well as the team. So again, just to make it a little bit clearer what the EcoChallenge is, it's all online. You would create or join a team, you would pick your challenge, and the challenge areas are often very complementary to what many of you would be teaching on anyway in your sustainability related classes. So there's an energy challenge area, there's water, transportation, food, there's community, health, waste. I think I already mentioned transportation. Anyway, there are a number of these challenge areas, and you can either focus in on one to complement whatever your curriculum goals are, or you can encourage the students to pick an action in any area that they're motivated to explore. Then the idea is, you invite others, you take your action, and then we track the impact. And I think that is one of the great kind of benefits or rewards. So in real time, you see what impact you're having. So again, it's just making the connections between, if you're learning in class about CO2 emissions and the effects of that, then you can choose an energy challenge, and you can actually see in real time how you as an individual can reduce your CO2 emissions. Right, same with water, same with waste, whatever the issue is, you'll be seeing in real time what the impact is. And I wanted to just share this slide so you can see, the different action areas that you can focus on. So in terms of implementation, there are lots of different ways that that campuses are using our resources. Certainly in the classroom, for the course books, they are used in the classroom either as a primary material or a supplementary, supplementary resource. The EcoChallenge is also being used in the classroom, particularly right now. We actually just launched our campus EcoChallenge, but right now we have 23 teams using our campus EcoChallenge, and they're using it in the classroom in conjunction with either one of our course books or or a separate material. We also see a lot of people using our resources for faculty and staff professional development and sustainability engagement offerings. Student life is another great place to use these resources. The EcoChallenge in particular, we have every October for our free EcoChallenge, we have at least 50. I think actually this last fall we had over 80 colleges join us. We always have at least 50, and a lot of those groups are student groups. And again, the barriers are low since it is free. The discussion course books can also be used, for EcoReps programs or Res Life, because they can be and are meant to be self-facilitated actually. So, outside of higher education, when I work with businesses or nonprofits or faith groups, the discussion course books are actually a standalone program that can be implemented. So, so students can do them as well outside of the classroom. I think green teams have often used our resources, and then sustainability offices as well. In case any of you on the webinar today are staff, these programs can be used, for engagement offerings throughout the year. And then freshman orientation or first year experience, we work we work with a handful of schools who are using, in particular, our Choices for Sustainable Living course book is a really great one to kind of provide that baseline of knowledge about the issues, as well as the opportunities for action too. And then finally, I'll mention the customized curriculum and EcoChallenge. So we do and we can customize our course books and EcoChallenge for faculty and staff. So we do that quite often, actually, particularly the custom courses. So if you have a syllabus and you're wanting to cover, 10 topics, topic areas, we can work with you to pair up content with what with whatever you're wanting to teach on. And I think a lot of people like using our process because it does get at that transformative learning piece, especially if you're going to follow our suggested model of getting the students together and really connecting with one another about their values and their habits and how the information relates. So that was a lot of talking, and hopefully I didn't go too fast, but we have plenty of time for questions. And I know those of you who have typed in any questions, Ira has been tracking those, and then he can let me know what they are now.
Very good, Deb. We have had a number of questions come in. They basically fall into two different baskets, a bunch of questions that relate to concepts and terminology on the one hand, and a handful of other questions about the materials that you've mentioned. So why don't I throw those questions out in two separate sets for you so you can address them together. Let me start with the conceptual and terminology questions. A couple of people have asked you to elaborate on the idea of keystone habits. If you could be more specific or give an example of a success in changing a keystone habit that you may be familiar with from those who have used that approach. That's one in the terminology side. Another question asks about your slide where you seem to distinguish between real world and experiential learning, and this individual was asking if you meant to distinguish those or group those together. Another one relating to terminology would be someone who is unclear what deep work means. I think that was on one of your slides as well. So I'll leave you with those three to address for starters.
Great, thank you. So I'll start with the keystone habits question. So a keystone habit would be, for example, let's say somebody really wants to stop drinking bottled water or soda because of the environmental impact. So let's say they've heard about the negative effects of bottled water, or they want to reduce their waste. So they start creating by creating a routine that gets them away from going to the vending machine or whatever it is. So let's say they succeed in doing that, and then it sort of cascades into other areas of decision making. So for example, if the motivator was I want to reduce my waste, if they change one thing, or even let's say it was like the coffee cup, the reusable coffee cup, like let's say any of those things, if that one habit or routine was changed, then that could end up being a keystone habit that kind of helps the individual to start looking at everything through that lens. So it could be, it's not that they're necessarily it's hard to know if something is going to be a keystone habit, but the goal is to try to find that. So, find a habit that has the potential to cascade into other areas. So, for example, if it was like, cutting out bottled water or soda cans or, the reusable coffee cups, the non reusable, the disposable coffee cups, if somebody succeeds in eliminating one of those things, then it very well could translate over to the trips to the grocery store and when, they're making purchase decisions there too. So I hope that clarifies. It's just meant to, you never know when you're going to stumble upon a keystone habit, but it's helpful to think about it that way, that like, with a lot of environmental or sustainability related habits, like sometimes you get one and it kind of has a cascade effect, and that's the goal, at least for us. That's what we're thinking about when we're thinking about the actions that we're encouraging people to take, and we're also thinking about that sequential piece where it's like it's one step and a lot, there's often a lot of critique in the environmental movement, at least in the nonprofit world, around, but changing that one light bulb isn't enough, or cutting out that one disposable cup isn't enough. But from a behavior change perspective, that it absolutely is the very best possibility of having the effect of having it, the possibility of having it become more widespread. So I hope that helps clarify the keystone habit question. I'll say, the next question had to do with real world versus experiential. I very well may have grouped them together. I do think of them separately, although certainly related. The real world is, and certainly experiential learning can be in the real world as well, although it might not necessarily have to be. So I see them as interrelated. I think the key is just to make sure that there's the opportunity for application of whatever the new knowledge is that's being acquired, whatever term you want to apply to that. I think it can vary, but I think that's what I was trying to get at with speaking about the real world versus experiential learning, making sure that there are those opportunities for application as soon as possible. In relation to whatever has been learned. And then the deep work question, that was actually, those were the words of Jean McGregor, who teaches at Evergreen State College. The way I understand it is really what I think transformative learning is speaking to. So the deep work is really for me, and again, I can't speak for what exactly Jean meant, but the way I interpret it is that it's really getting at that deepest level of the iceberg model, like the level that is, relating to the mental models, relating to the assumptions, relating to the values, and the often invisible realm of what's happening. So kind of, just going beyond the surface, I think, is what Jean meant, and then really tending to that realm of transformative learning, which is asking a lot of questions about assumptions and habits and and making it personal too. I think that was the other piece, is not, it's not just collecting the information out there, but it's really, how does this information relate to me personally? How am I fitting into the systems at play? So that's how I interpreted Jean's mention of deep work.
Thanks, Deb. Let's stick with the idea of transformative learning. Another attendee is asking if you've worked with developing or using a campus sustainability policy or some other institutional document as a vehicle for transformative learning.
No, unfortunately, I don't. I have not. If I understand the question correctly, I have not worked in that sphere yet. Although whoever is asking, I'd be interested in exploring what that might look like.
Okay, we have a few more questions relating to the materials themselves. For example, one is asking, how can faculty use the EcoChallenge in conjunction with course books? Is that something that faculty are already doing?
Yes, thank you. So yes, right now, let's see, I'll try to give an example. I can't remember which college is doing this, but right now with our Campus EcoChallenge, we have a faculty using the Choices for Sustainable Living course book. I believe it's University of Puget Sound, actually. Anyway, they're using the Choices for Sustainable Living course book, and in that course book, the sessions are broken up into different topic areas. So, for example, there's a session on waste, there's a session on food, there's a session on transportation, there's a session on sustainable communities. So already, if you remember the EcoChallenge challenge areas, those challenge areas can correspond with the sessions in Choices for Sustainable Living. So that faculty member is encouraging students to focus on actions that relate to the sessions that they're reading, in conjunction with. So the actions are complementing what they're reading. So they're focusing on the waste actions when they're reading about waste, and they're focusing on the transportation actions when they're reading about transportation. So that's one example. I also know, and so in that example, the Campus Eco Challenge is spanning the whole semester, or most of that semester. In other examples, I know that for example, Portland Community College, they will be using our course book, our course book and the Campus Eco Challenge, but they're just doing the 2-week Eco Challenge. So they're focusing on the content and the actual, using the course book, and then having the Eco Challenge at the end, towards the end of the semester, kind of as a culmination of, integrating the kind of the more book learning with the action learning. So they'll end their semester with the 2 weeks of action, and then really seeing what their collective impact was at the end.
Thanks, Deb. We're coming to the top of the hour, but we still have questions coming in, so we'll just keep going. We had given ourselves up to 90 minutes if necessary, but let's take at least a couple more questions. One question that just came in is, it looks like NWEI has been measuring behavioral change stickiness. Can you explain how you measure this? Is it self-reported?
Behavior change stickiness. This is interesting. I would love to know from the person who asked the question what. I am not aware of us measuring behavior change stickiness. I'm wondering if it's about how we're measuring the impacts. Is it about how we're measuring the impacts of the Eco Challenge?
Well, I'll ask the questioner to
clarify.
The quick clarification is yes. That's what she's asking about.
Okay, great. Okay, perfect. Yes, so we have been with both the discussion course books and the Eco Challenge. We are doing our best to measure the behavior change. So with the Eco Challenge, it's a little bit easier because it's immediately quantifiable. How many times did the participant ride their bike versus drive, or how many times did they compost, or whatever the action was. So we're able to track it very tangibly that way. We also track the impact via a survey that we do. So I guess just backing up for a minute. So each person and each team has their impact from the duration of the challenge that is recorded online, actually. On each person's and team's page that's recorded. And then we follow up with a survey too. And what we found is that a very high, it's in the 90th percentile of survey respondents say that they plan on sticking with their action. So we just have started doing longer term surveys to try to really get a better sense of how long term the changes are. But at least thus far, it is looking like it's working in terms of the opportunity to try the new habit, doing it in support with other people, helps get it kickstarted, and then the surveys are also showing us that people are continuing the habit in some form or another.
Thanks, Deb. I'm still monitoring incoming questions and comments, and a few more to tee up for you. First of all, a couple of related questions here. Can you say a bit more about how the discussion and the small group process works in the classroom, and how has this work connected up to the curriculum or faculty's work with students?
Sure. So the way that I've most often seen it work is that a faculty will use one or more of our course books as and assign the readings to the students. Sometimes it's not the entire course book's worth, but it may be 5 out of 4 or 5 out of 7 sessions worth, or so on. And then often the faculty member will encourage the students to break up into small groups in the classroom, so that a portion of the classroom time is used having dialogue, and then often there's a large group report back, or large group dialogue, and I hear that process works really well. I've also heard that students are meeting outside of the actual class time to have their small group discussions, and then coming in with a report for the class, and I think that also I've heard great things about. And I think the second part of the question was just how it's matching up with faculty. I think, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think that the small group, the dialogue component is just integrated however the faculty sees fit, whether in the classroom or out. And for those who aren't, don't have, or for the online courses, for example, the reflective questions that we include can also be used, as an essay assignment, and I think that can also work really well. So it's really up to the faculty member how they want to use the material, but there's a lot of flexibility there. We certainly suggest a process, and then we also see people using the materials in a variety of ways.
Deb, we still have a couple more questions. You up for fielding a couple more, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go with these last couple then. As those on the line know, we're basically targeting an audience for teaching faculty in higher education, but this is an interesting question that moves beyond that. The attendee asks, what about targeting younger people and not an academic setting, or more disenfranchised populations with an eye toward cultural and socioeconomic relevance? I'd like to comment on that.
Yeah. Well, actually, the Earth Institute started more in that sphere, or it started in the sphere outside of education. So we actually started our work in businesses, and our discussion course books were used over the lunch hour in businesses in downtown Portland, which is where our office is based, Portland, Oregon, and we found a lot of success in that format, getting people to connect where they're already meeting, and from there it really spread. We do a lot of work with faith communities and nonprofit groups and nature centers and community organizations, so on. So definitely agree that, or whether the questioner was saying this, but certainly we feel that it's very important to have this kind of learning and opportunities for action happening outside of the formal education arena. In terms of disenfranchised populations and people within different socioeconomic brackets, that's certainly on our radar. We have we've been doing quite a bit of work with an equity cohort in Portland and are trying to figure out, particularly with our EcoChallenge, because that we feel that programmatic offering has the fewest barriers. I mean, certainly there's not a cost barrier, the time barrier is low, and if you have access to the internet, you're able to participate. So we've been looking into, particularly with that offering, how to make that more accessible.
Great. Let's end on an implementation question. You mentioned professional development as an implementation example. What does that look like in the context of for example, a sustainability office using the course books?
Great. Yeah, so basically, the discussion course books can be used as a standalone offering. I think because they're course books, a lot of people think, oh, they are meant to be used in the classroom. Well, as I just mentioned, even before we were working with higher education, we're working with a lot of other sectors, and they are designed to be used by themselves, implemented by themselves. So anybody can facilitate these, and actually we suggest that the role of the facilitator rotates. So if somebody in a sustainability office wanted to host a professional development series, they could use one of our course books. Again, I'll use the example Choices for Sustainable Living, because I think that provides such a great foundation for the different issues and why they're important, and then also what can be done to address the issues. That course book is a 7-session course book, and so it would correspond to a 7-session offering. So a sustainability office could offer a 7-session course and invite faculty and staff or students for the experience, and they would meet for about an hour each time, and they would do the readings ahead of time, and then they would come together and follow our process of dialogue, following the discussion questions that we've included. And so it's sort of like a ready-made offering that can be used as an engagement tool pretty much anywhere, but I definitely see it most often via sustainability offices.
Excellent. Thank you, Deb, for sharing both your insights on pedagogy approaches as well as explaining how some of the Northwest Earth Institute materials can be utilized in sustainability in higher education. Sustainability Curriculum Consortium looks forward to further collaboration with NWEI. We hope that those attendees on the line will look for our further monthly newsletter updates. We'll look at the SCC website at www.curriculumforsustainability.org. And please remember to hold the date, June 26th, 27th in Philadelphia, for our first SCC faculty conference. With that, we'll sign off for today. And again, our thanks to Deb, and please send our thanks as well to Lacy.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.